Welcome to the Almería Football Podcast with your hosts, Tim and
Tom.
Hi, Tom. How are you?
I'm not bad, but a little bit disappointed, Tim. How are you?
A disappointing day, isn't it, in the city?
It is, yes, disappointing for everyone who is a fan of at the Almería Football Club after last night's disappointing match and loss against Osasuna.
Yeah, it was 1-0, and there are some defeats that you, as a small club in a league, you can accept, losing to Real Madrid, or even playing well and losing with a bit of luck. But last night was a really disappointing result. The overall impression, Tom, if you had to give a 0 to 10 for performance as a teacher, what mark would you give Almería last night?
I could only give Almería a 3 out of 10 for the performance last night. I would say some players did okay, but I can't speak for the whole team. Some players were disappointing, and collectively, as a unit, as a team, very disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, it is a difficult time. They've lost Sadiq, who was the main man, the go-to striker, who kind of gave a simple solution to Ruby, the manager, in terms of tactics. When you've got a big man who scores goals and dribbles and retains possession up front, then that's kind of half of your tactical work done for you. So, Tom, that's where we're going to start. The Sadiq replacement, Sosa, the poor man's Diego Costa, I've heard him called.
As we call him on this podcast. Yes.
That is what we call him on his podcast. Tom, are we going to be able to continue calling him this, or do you think we need to revise his nickname?
The poor man's, yes, we when we say the poor man's, we're saying he's perhaps less valuable than Diego Costa.
But maybe similar.
But similar in some ways, yes. But Diego Sousa was very disappointing last night. He did his best. I felt that I know the fans were booing him at one point. I felt that was a little bit harsh. By harsh, I mean it was a little bit unfair, because it was clear to me that the problem was with the whole team. It wasn't just with him.
Yeah, I mean, Diego Sosa, he's the kind of player that needs to use his muscle, get on the end of half of through balls that are kind of like, he likes a battle, he likes the ball in the air. And, you know, this is an Almería side that have been used to playing with Sadiq. Okay, he's physical, but he's also got incredible skills with the ball on the floor and a great first touch. And I'm not sure Sosa has that.
As I saw it last night, I saw that he's just maybe a little bit short of pace. He had one chance, but he arrived at the ball just a little bit later than the defender as a cross came in on the ground. He does hold the ball up quite well, but he is also dependent on support around him. And I don't think he has a good partnership, a good understanding with Ramazani, because there were too many times when the ball came to him and he was not able to keep possession, even though his first touch and first control was initially good. He often failed to retain possession for the team, or have that little bit of trickery to be able to turn to create an opportunity for someone like Ramazani to run onto.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that could be a question of the shape they played in and where Ramazani's starting position is. And maybe that's something that Ruby can look into and maybe adapt for future games. And other players who I think maybe looked a bit weaker, well, certainly was caught out for the goal. And when I say to be caught out or to catch somebody out, he was tricked. He was fooled. He was left wanting. For the goal, he was really out of position, and he made it really easy for the ball across, and a low ball across from that close to the area. It only just requires a well-timed run and a good finish, and it's a guaranteed goal. And on the other side, we had Akimi.
Can I just clarify, were you talking about Pozo, the right back?
Pozo, sorry,
yes.
Yeah. And on the other side, Akiemi. And I like those players. They're two players I really like, but I think their best qualities are with the ball, attacking. And in a league where you're not the strongest team in the league anymore, you do need to have the other side of the game. Was it just once that Pozo was caught out, or was it a common thing that the defense was looking weak?
There was a period in the first half where Pozo was caught out a few times. Actually, there were the Osasuna attack was very, very dangerous down that side with Moy, I think his name was Moy Garcia, came from Villarreal, and their fullback was overlapping with very powerful runs. So Pozo was exposed, but he wasn't the only one. Egaras was actually the player who gave the ball away, played a terrible pass straight to the centre midfield, opposing centre midfield, that created the break and the opportunity to score. So it was no surprise to see Egaras come off at half-time as well. Akiemi, you mentioned, I thought he gives them a little bit more attacking quality. He had one or two good moments in the second half getting forward. But again, you wonder whether his best position is in a back four, or whether he should be playing a little bit further up in front of a back three of three defenders.
Don't jump the gun, as they say. To jump the gun is a sport from athletics. An idiom from athletics means to start before your time. We're going to talk exactly about that, Tom. Yeah, I agree. Basically, that these players are players who do have quality, and it's the manager's job to find a shape that allows these players to show their qualities. So,
can I comment on that?
Sorry.
Can I make a comment on that?
Of course.
The manager's job. There seemed to be a deficiency tactically. Almeria didn't really know what to do. Football is often a game of transitions, and Almeria were not able to transition to win possession and move the ball quickly up the field in counter-attack. Too many times they turned around and played the ball backwards to secure possession, which meant that they had 10 outfield Osasuna players in front of them. And then they were playing the same two tactics every time. It would typically be a long diagonal ball from one of the centre backs to try and pick out Diego Sosa, or they would try and work the ball through a channel in the midfield. But nearly always they were getting caught out. They were not able to move the ball up into the Osasuna final third of the field. The interceptions were happening in the center of midfield. So for me, this indicates that they lack a quality attacking midfielder, someone who can control the game and link play together, keep possession of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting comment, because that's a comment that we've had in the past, that that attacking midfielder position in Almeria, even last season, was a bit absent. They were relying on the genius of Sadiq, or the directness of Ramathani from the wings, and somebody to keep possession, to hold the ball, to probe the opposition, to test the opposition without and wait for the space to arrive, as opposed to forcing the opportunity like you might do with a Sadiq or a Ramazani. Someone who's able to play with, keep the ball in difficult areas while still having a look around them and seeing where the space is, seeing if there's a through ball they can play or something like that. And that does kind of bring us all to the big question of the day, the elephant in the corner. An elephant in the corner is a big problem that nobody wants to speak about. Well, we on the Almeria Football Podcast, we do want to take on these elephant in the corners. What's the way forward, Tom? Almeria got promoted last season with 4 at the back. It was a very successful formation. It did have limitations, and maybe it depended on the qualities of certain individuals. Or do they use the 5 at the back model, which started so successfully against Real Madrid, and then the victory against Sevilla, and then the draw away, of course, in Elche? They were good results. And personally, I think not only did they allow more solidity at the back, covering the problems that Rodrigo Eli has with the ball in behind, but also it frees the midfield up. And we saw a little bit more creativity, a little bit more quality and possession in those 3 games where they're 5 at the back. So I personally think there is a solution that they already have some familiarity with. So Tom, what would you do? We've got 2 difficult away matches coming up against Mallorca and Atletico de Bilbao. So what would you do if you were Ruby, Tom? 5 at the back or 4 at the back?
I would switch to 5 at the back for the away games. Certainly for the away games, the pressure is on the home team to provide the attacking play. I think in some ways Almeria, and as we saw with Osasuna last night, the away team can be comfortable, not with possession of the ball, but ready to spring open the counter-attack. Almeria will be able to do that with 5 at the back as well. The issue they've got is when they need to attack and keep the ball at home. At the moment, as I've mentioned, without that magic centre midfield general to control play for them, they need more than one tactic. And this tactic of 5 at the back and playing more directly, counter-attacking football, will not work against everyone. So Ruby can keep with the 5 at the back system, especially away games, but they will still need to continue working together, developing a way of playing through midfield, because last night they failed terribly.
Yeah, I get that, but I think there could be secondary benefits and even tertiary, so third benefits from 5 at the back. For example, I look at the attacking threat that Akiemi has when he's a wing back and not a left back, so the left sided of a 5, not a 4. He's so attacking that he allows Ramazani to almost play as a second striker, not to hug the wing the whole time, which, and also because they're more solid at the back, it gives less defensive responsibilities to the striker, to the midfielders. So, for example, I think back to that Seville match, and I was thinking Robertoni had good moments in attacking areas in the centre of midfield. And of course, they create an overload. And when I say an overload, I mean too many players for the defenders, with Ramazani starting, maybe coming inside, Robertoni getting on a bit. It becomes a lot more difficult. Whereas if we stay at 4 at the back, you've got a designated winger in Ramazani. You've got central midfielders, but they've got defensive responsibilities. They can't commit fully to their attacking roles. Maybe they're saving energy when the ball goes forward because they don't want to sacrifice their defensive areas. And of course, someone like Sosa, you were saying earlier, Tom, that he looked a very isolated figure when he did manage to keep the ball under control. Well, I kind of think all of this would be less of a problem with 5 at the back, because I just think there are so many. There's the solution, there's and there's various consequences of it. So I think, the transfer window is closed. It's impossible to buy anyone else now. So I think that's the thing they should do in the next 2 away games, definitely. But I think they should really consider thinking about making 5 at the back their formation and sticking with it, using it as the base to vary from.
Yes, I think you could be right. We have to consider this is their first season in the league. They're coming up against most of the teams have more experience and also are bigger. They're more expensive, wealthier squads of players. Osasuna had a squad valued at 125 million euros compared with Almeria's 75 million euros. And Osasuna are considered one of the smaller clubs in the league. I think their stadium has 23,000 spectators. So we have to consider that most of the time Almeria will be the underdog, and 5 at the back will suit the underdog style of playing football.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So, Tom, talking about the match last night, it's always exciting when you've got new players on display. Let's talk about the new boys, especially I'm interested in Vinicius Lazaro and Bilal. How did they get on? Any encouraging signs?
Yes, I have to say, Ruby did one thing well. He did try and use his substitutes very well during the game to effect changes. He made 2 changes at halftime. Torre came on,
Bilal
Torre
came on,
yeah, and
for Agueras.
That's right. That was a halftime sub. El Bilal came on for Sousa about 66, 67 minutes. Robertoni came on off for Lazaro, who came on. So Ruby did try his best with the subs. El Bilal showed some glimpses of a lot of speed, a lot of enthusiasm. He was in my opinion, he could have been a little bit more selfish at one moment where it looked like he might be able to create a goal-scoring chance for himself, but he chose to pass it and lost possession. Lazaro started bad. His first touch, he kicked it straight off. He committed a foul. His first few minutes were not so good, but he grew into the game. And actually, in the final minute, he did show a glimpse of what he can do in the 18-yard box of Osasuna. He showed that he's got the ability to beat a player like that. He swerved inside, cut to his left, created space for a cross. So both of them show great potential, but it's clear that they were not able to affect the game that we hoped. There was a few minutes of excitement when they came on, and Almeria had one spell of possession in the second half, 3 or 4 corners consecutively. We hoped it would last, but the experience of Osasuna took control of the game again. And I have to say, 1-0 was a very, very generous scoreline for Almería. It could have easily been 4-0 or 5-0 for the clear chances that Osasuna had. In comparison, you could count Almeria's half chances on one hand over 90 minutes.
Okay, so the good news is, of course, that hopefully the next game should be better than last night. Tom, just a couple of things that came out of last night. Ruby is he's really loved around the city. Lots of people give him a lot of credit for obviously their promotion and the style of football they played to manage to get promotion. But last night there was a bit of friction. As we've mentioned already, Diego Sousa was being booed. Now, booing is when fans make a sound of dissatisfaction. I can do it right now. Boo. Okay. I personally like to boo referees, but I've never booed my own players, Tom. And that's my question. Well, no, that's my next question. What do you think from Ruby's perspective? Do you think it was potentially a bit dangerous to get angry at the supporters for booing Sosa? Do you think he's maybe earned the respect to be able to kind of communicate his desires to the supporters, maybe like a Jurgen Klopp could do at Liverpool? Or do you think he's playing with fire? If you upset the fans one day, have a couple of bad results, well, you'll be unemployed a couple of weeks later. So, Tom, what's your opinion on this kind of things?
Yes, lovely expression, playing with fire, taking an unnecessary risk. I think that Ruby, the fans will forgive him for that. I agree with Ruby's point of view that Sousa didn't play great, but it was partly the tactics of the team. Sousa was no worse than some of the other players on the field. So I sympathize with Ruby's argument. But when you turn around to the fans and you make gestures like this, you are creating a conflict, creating a tension that need not be there. Ruby has the power to explain in a press conference when things are calm afterwards, anything like that he wishes to explain to the fans. So I don't think it was a great move, but I don't think it was a big deal. I think the fans will forgive him for that one.
Okay, yeah. And I do think, though, moving on to the next question, should fans boo at all? On one side of the coin, you have the argument you're there to support the club. You support the club if they win, lose, or draw, through thick and through thin, which means through good times and bad times. The other side of the coin is you're a paying customer. You are the person who pays the salaries, essentially, of these football players. So you are the boss. And if I go to work and I do a bad job at work, I can tell you, Tom, my boss criticizes me. So, what do you think, Tom? Where do you stand? As I said before, I've never booed. I said before I'd never booed an Arsenal player, but then I thought, actually, no, I have. I've booed Mesut Ozil, and I thought about why. And it was for lack of effort, for lack of running. And I've also realized I also booed Andre Arshavin for the same reason, a lack of running, losing the ball and not giving absolutely everything you've got to win the ball back immediately. So a lack of effort, I think, is a justifiable reason. But I don't think a poor touch or a poor performance or missing an opportunity are a good enough reason to boo. So what do you think, Tom? What's your opinion on booing?
As a player, as a amateur football coach, I think that the vast majority of players will respond positively to encouragement, especially when they make a mistake. So when a fan does boo his own players, he's risking causing the player and ultimately his team to play worse. So I would say that booing can be counterproductive. However, that example you gave with Mesut Ozil, I had a moment last night where I shouted at the TV screen for Ramazani, who was chasing back after losing the ball, and then just decided at the halfway line that he was going to let the player go. He was only 1 or 2 meters from the player. And I was very frustrated because he could have continued running, putting pressure on the player and forced the error. Even if he's on the wrong side of the player to make a tackle, he still has a duty to pressure him for the team. So in that situation, I might have booed Ramazani in the stadium. So I think it's always been part of football, and sometimes it is justified particularly when we see a lack of effort.
Yeah, it's definitely the case that it does happen. There's nothing you can do about it. It is part of the game. Maybe it's not, as you say, as a player, it's very unlikely to have a short-term positive impact. It's more likely to have a negative impact in the short term. But if that player goes back to the changing room after and realizes he's been booed and thinks, okay, I need to sort my life out, as we say in England, to get my priorities in order, then maybe in the long term it could be something which is positive. But it is a risk, though, and it's not nice to be booed in any context.
A player with a very strong mentality can take that booing and turn it into something that they can use to make them play better. I understand that this is what Michael Jordan continually did when he felt he received any kind of criticism or abuse from fans or opponents. He used that energy to make him perform better. So
yeah,
a strong mentality,
I think
the booing can be a good thing.
I think the heart of the booing is essentially this. You've got a stadium full of people whose dream throughout their childhood was to be one of those players, none of whom have the quality to be one of those players, but they all have the desire. They all have possibly more desire than some of those players. And when these players are firstly living the dream, getting paid an unimaginable amount of money, then I think that's the heart of the problem. As we say, that's not to say it solves it or doesn't solve the problem. So, Tom, some difficult away matches coming up. The league table is looking pretty if you look at it from one direction. If you look at it, where are Almería in the league? We are 14th. If Almería finish in 14th, there will be celebrations throughout the city. But if you look at the league table in an alternative form, Almería are also level with third bottom. So obviously it's very early days in the league season, but the league table is starting to take shape. The teams at the bottom are familiar faces, apart from Seville, who you would expect to have a boost at some point. Are we going to stick with our original predictions? I said around 15th, 14th. Are you still aiming for upper mid table, Tom?
Yes, I still hopeful, because if we know anything about this management team, they're prepared to roll the dice. They'll get rid of Ruby if they need to bring in someone fresh. And in January, they'll bring in some fresh players then as well, providing that their transfers and their wage bill permits it. So I think this club has the resources to do well. But at the moment, we are having what we discussed on the last podcast, teething troubles, bringing these new players in and getting them working together into a system. But I still am confident and, of course, hopeful that the team will finish comfortably.
It sounds like on the Almería Football Podcast, we are keeping the faith. And that's all we've got time for today on the podcast. Tom, if people want to get involved in the conversation, ask us some questions, how can they interact with us?
They can find our Facebook page, Learn English Football Podcast. That's a great place to leave a comment and join the conversation. They can also, if they want to help us, they can leave a little rating or a review on the podcast platform that they're using us on. We are available on most of the main podcast platforms now. So a little review or rating or a share, if you think that you have a friend that would like to hear this content, please share us with your friends.
Exactly. We do like a share and a comment. Thanks a lot, Tom. Fingers crossed for the next matches, and we'll see our listeners back soon on the Almería Football Podcast. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Tim. Bye-bye.